This bill provides a solution. It provides the way forward.
Like a you-know-what rising from the ashes, there was supposed to be new life, a way forward for the University of Idaho to buy the University of Phoenix, but Idaho's Senate blocked that path. If a new bill introduced today goes much further, well, there may not be a great path forward for undocumented immigrants in Idaho either, giving the state a way to send them home, bypassing the feds.
It is creating the environment of putting kids on welfare so that they continue to want to be on it.
Summer meal programs are also not moving forward because feeding kids is apparently setting them up for a life of dependence? While the University of Phoenix is very much a real thing, it has a bit in common with the mythical bird of the same name. They're both supposed to flame out at some point and then start a new life cycle. And it was supposed to be with the help of the University of Idaho, at least for the university. However, the Idaho Senate killed legislation to restructure the University of Phoenix sale. U of I still plans to buy the for-profit university, but they want to do it by proxy through a separate nonprofit entity called 4-3 Education. Idaho Attorney General's office, well, they're not exactly convinced that this is a legal way to do it, or that this last-second Band-Aid is the legislature is fixing those concerns. Here's Andrew Bartline.
The life cycle of the current Phoenix is fixed.
Their investment model is based on about a 7-year hold. The 7 years is up.
With anticipation of ashes set to reform into the University of Idaho.
On something that I personally support.
Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder is making moves to keep the sale in order because the latest word in the wings is liability.
This bill provides a solution. It provides the way forward to create a path.
While the University of Idaho planned to buy the University of Phoenix for $685 million, a separate nonprofit entity is set to absorb the institution to draw a line between the school and the state.
It was determined that to do a 501c3 type of nonprofit was not the way to do it.
Senator Winder's talking about a letter from the Attorney General's office stating the U of I Board of Regents is going beyond their constitutional power, meaning the move could be illegal.
The way forward was to use a body politic.
Winder's bill wants to restructure the nonprofit into a public body with legislative oversight.
By adding a senator and a representative to the board.
There's just one problem.
I am not convinced yet that the firewall is there to prevent liability to the state in case something would go wrong.
Liability.
It seems to me a little bit odd that we are the only state clamoring to make this purchase happen. This senator votes no.
Because even with the unstructuring, the AG's office wrote another letter stating its concerns are unchanged. It's a different tone from the initial sales pitch, where lawmakers were told there's little to no risk.
It's sort of a tacit admission that they admit they were wrong. I'm not certain why we should be so quick to trust that they got it right this time.
Lawmakers aren't following the AG's word alone. State Treasurer Julie Ellsworth also wrote a letter the day of voting, calling the restructure a step back, writing, quote, "Whereas before the risk was deemed to be perceived, this potentially makes it real."
Herndon?
The University of
Does?
Phoenix is still due reformation.
Van Orden?
But Idaho lawmakers say,
Seiderveld?
where there's smoke,
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
there's fire.
Go ahead, Senator.
And so without actually being able to look into this a little bit further, and it's being such a quick thing, I will be voting no.
With the Attorney General questioning if that current sales structure and operation is legal, and the state treasury saying that this proposed legislative solution opens up the state for even more liability, and Idaho lawmakers don't have another solution in the wings. So the University of Idaho was briefed to me today, Brian. I got an email back. What is this, 13 words? We are disappointed this bill did not pass. We are reviewing our options.
14 words.
Very brief. Looks like they want a path forward. This evidently is not it.
So as it stands right now, this deal to buy the University of Phoenix is dead.
I think that's a possible outcome. We tried to get in contact with Senator Winder today to understand how he sees it.
Okay.
Did not hear back. University of Idaho saying they're looking at their options.
Okay, and speaking of that, I think there was one other state, Arkansas, which tried to do this. They were chased off by the debt from it was a couple years ago when they tried to buy the University of Phoenix. So
Yeah.
could be a similar situation. All right, thanks, Andrew. The lawmakers wanted to effectively end the legislative session tomorrow. That was the plan. In fact, I think it was the 22nd, then it was the 29th. Now we're maybe pushing it back, obviously, because there's still a lot to be done.
TBD.
At the State House. In fact, lawmakers are still pitching some new ideas, trying to tackle even some big topics like, I don't know, illegal immigration at the state level. House State Affairs passed legislation that kind of addresses that today.
Yeah, this is a pretty big solution, a pretty big mechanism that Idaho's taking a look at here late in the session, so we'll tell you about it. House Bill 753, it creates new crimes dealing with illegal immigration, specifically in the state of Idaho. And the legislation uses the term alien, and the definition of that under United States Code. An alien legally means any person not a citizen or national of the United States. So the bill would make it, quote, a misdemeanor upon a first conviction and a felony for subsequent offenses for an alien to enter or attempt to enter the state of Idaho directly from any other foreign nation at any location other than a lawful port of entry. So the legislation would also give Idaho judges, magistrates, expansive new powers to order certain aliens to return to the foreign nation from which that person entered or attempted to enter from. Refusal to follow that would be a felony. And the legislation also says that if a non-citizen is found under this law, they will be processed for fingerprints, photos, biometric data, basically just everything they need to have to record this person officially as a non-citizen. Bill sponsor Jaron Crane explains why he pitched this late in the session, and a major key, he believes the federal government not doing their job.
The goal of this legislation is to close down the borders, use our law enforcement that's already in place. These guys know how and what to do. This allows them to ask some questions that they need to ask to find out if someone is here as an illegal alien. You'll see the definition of alien on page 1, and then be able to process accordingly. They then go before a magistrate, and the magistrate's going to ask them, would you like to go ahead and leave, or are you going to stay? And if they stay and this happens again, they're going to be facing a felony.
So, as you can imagine, there are some major criticisms about the legislation, which, by the way, it's modeled off of a Texas law that is currently caught up in the courts. But criticisms of the Idaho law include impacts on the workforce, lack of humanity, and a waste of Idaho taxpayer dollars. It's also pointed out in testimony by an expert from the American Immigration Lawyers Association that the proposed Idaho law may not even be legal.
Article 6, paragraph 2 of the U.S. Constitution. The federal government has a broad constitutional powers in determining what aliens should be admitted to the United States and not the states. Representative Craig argues that Article 1, Section 10 gives the state power to set rules to protect the border in case of an invasion. However, no such invasion exists between the border of Canada and Idaho. There is no data of that such an inflection, so this bill is unconstitutional.
So it's late in the legislative session, or maybe it's not. I guess we'll find out. But this now goes to the full Idaho House. Brian, I know there are some questions about the legality of this in terms of like, whoa, you know, can you just stop anybody on the street and ask for their ID? In terms of practice, we would have to see. But there is a part of Idaho code that says if you're driving a car and you are pulled over by law enforcement, if they ask to see your ID, you do have to give it to them. So I know there's also been questions about what if other people are in the car and what about their immigration status. So this is going to go to the full House late in the session, though. Big idea.
Well, according to the federal government, this is a U.S. Department of Justice thing. Not a magistrate judge. This is an immigration court that hears a case like this, and then they judge their rules for deportation. Then ICE takes care of it after that, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But you could also leave voluntarily, but I just don't see how they can just bypass federal rules and regulations on that.
I guess the courts will let us know. Right. But again, this is just on the House floor right now, and it is late in the session. It's been acknowledged by lawmakers, so we'll see if this goes anywhere. It could be a setup for next year, or it could be campaigning.
Could be campaigning. It is an election year. Thanks, Joe. Speaking of campaigning, $1 million summer program to feed more than 100,000 hungry Idaho kids has been scrapped from the budget of the Department of Health and Welfare. It was quite the ride for the appropriations bill known as Senate Bill 1445. It came out of JFAC and the Senate Finance Committee with a do-pass recommendation. But alas, today, senators did not heed that suggestion. The line item most of them had a problem with, the Summer EBT Benefit Program. It would have set aside nearly $1.1 million to continue a federal program which was established during COVID back in December of 2022. Families would get a $40 a month debit card per child, up to $120, to use during the summer to buy food. Different from when it started. When the federal government covered the entire cost, well, states, which would be Idaho, would then be required to pay for half of the program, thus the $1.1 million. That addition to the health and welfare budget. But several senators weren't having it, saying we already have a federal program that covers this, which, by the way, Idaho isn't part of this summer because we failed to enroll in the federal summer lunch program, losing out on the $15 million to fund it. They also said it's going to be more expensive than the fiscal note indicates, and oh yeah, this is welfare.
You can think of this as universal food service. I think generally we'd be opposed to universal basic income, universal housing, universal food service. That's what we've got in this budget.
And now we're just seeking to give permanent food stamp EBT cards to kids, even if their parents make six figures.
The problem that I see is this program is easy to abuse. If we're giving kids a debit card, anyone can utilize that card. And again, it was pointed out that they can take this anywhere they want to that takes food stamps like the gas station and be able to utilize it.
The bill failed 10 to 25, but it was a bigger failure for one woman who has been working on getting this funded since last summer when it became known Idaho forgot to sign up for the federal program. Dawn Pierce is with Hunger Free America, and she was down at the State House today to follow the fruits of her labor, only to see it spoil because of what she heard on the Senate floor.
What I heard was a lot of misinformation from the members of the Senate regarding summer EBT, what it is and what it is not. And I believe it was sent back to JFAC based on misinformation.
Give me a couple of those items.
Some of the misinformation was that kids were going to be using this at liquor stores to buy Monster drinks. That's not true. That children were going to be given these cards over the summer to use to buy their own food. That's not true. That it was just going to be a universal free meals program for all, no matter how much your parents make, and that's not true.
That parents who make six figures, their kids can get on this as well.
No, they cannot. Nope. They have to qualify according to the income. It has nothing to do with community eligibility of the district or the school.
You're obviously very emotional and connected to this.
I am.
Understandably.
I am. I have a personal story of hunger and poverty, and consider myself a hunger and poverty survivor. And I went to bed and cried because I didn't know how I was supposed to feed my son. I was so grateful that my son got free breakfast and lunch at school, because those are the meals that I didn't have to plan for, and I didn't have to use those food dollars for, because he was getting that food at school, so I could buy a little extra for dinner. I took every single parent who goes to bed crying, I took them with me when I fought for this. And I'm so sorry for them that they're going to continue to go to bed and cry instead of our legislature doing the right thing and just feeding 107,000 children. 107,000 children is not a massive welfare program.
Now what?
Oh my gosh, I'm not stopping. I still have all of those parents in my heart. I still have all of them in my head. I'm doubling down. I'm taking all of my frustration and my anger and my disappointment, and I am just doubling down, and I am not going to stop until we get summer EBT in Idaho for these kids.
Senate Bill 1445 went back to JFAC after it failed on the Senate floor this afternoon, and after a newer version with the EBT program still intact, it failed by 3 votes. It was passed out of the Budget Committee, though, without the summer lunch program funding included. Well, Governor Little has signed a bill into law that would create a statewide next of kin database. House Bill 1365 will establish a voluntary next of kin database within the DMV at the Idaho Transportation Department. Starting July 1st of next year, or this year, I should say, when you renew your driver's license, you'll have the option to provide or update your next of kin. Only coroners and law enforcement will have access to this information, and they don't plan to use it for anything else. Moments ago, Idaho transportation budget failed in the Senate, mainly because of a line in that budget that revokes the sale of the old Idaho transportation headquarters. If you recall, 2 years ago, a frozen pipe burst flooding the old ITD headquarters on State Street. Now the department, well, they wanted to sell the property. They even drafted a sale agreement to the highest bidder, but the state legislature says they get to make the final call on that, and by, well, putting the budget aside, failing it, they're basically sinking the sale. The bill only passed by the House, I should say, passed the House by just one vote, but today failed in the Senate, 16-19. There's now a fourth suspect in connection to the inmate escape and shooting at St. Alphonsus last week. Abby Davis tells us who and has more of the news you need to know in today's 411.
Police say a fourth person is under arrest and charged in connection to the shooting at St. Alphonsus last week. 27-year-old Tia Garcia of Twin Falls is now charged with felony aiding and abetting escape. Boise police say she was already in custody at the Twin Falls County Jail for a probation parole violation when she was charged. Skylar Mead and his accomplice escaped police last Wednesday after the Idaho Department of Correction took Mead to the hospital for self-inflicted wounds. Police say the accomplice, Nicholas Umfenauer, shot at officers in the ambulance bay. The two got away, leading officials on a 36-hour manhunt before they were arrested. Speaking of suspects, there's now a suspect in the Caldwell shooting from yesterday. The shooting left a 44-year-old man with multiple gunshot wounds. The Canyon County Sheriff's Office says 34-year-old Gabriel Francisco Meza is currently wanted on a felony warrant for aggravated battery related to the shooting. Police are asking for your help finding him. Meza also goes by Juarez. He has multiple tattoos on his neck, wrists, and hands. He's 5'6" and weighs about 175 pounds. Meza is believed to be armed and dangerous, and police say do not approach him if you see him. If you have any information, call 911 or contact non-emergency dispatch at 208-454-7531. Two people are in jail after a multi-county police chase started yesterday afternoon. The Ada County Sheriff's Office says the chase started north of Horseshoe Bend in Boise County and continued south on Highway 55 into Ada County. They say the car tried to run into several other cars during the high-speed chase. Eagle police were able to stop it. No one was injured. There is some good news this week. Today, Ned Lamont, the governor of Connecticut, where Yale University is located, issued a proclamation declaring today as University of Idaho Day in the Nutmeg State. All because the Vandals marching band played for the Bulldogs in the first round of the NCAA March Madness tournament when the Yale band couldn't travel. U of I learned their songs in a day, threw on some Yale gear, and performed at the game. Even called themselves the Van Dogs. Round 16 of March Madness tips off tonight. Hopefully your bracket isn't too busted. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Lots of people waking up to some of those snowy conditions in the mountains today. And here in the valleys, we've seen some of those showers, some of which have been stronger, move through the area. We just saw a shower start to taper off in the Boise area, so things looking a little bit drier right now. It's also looked a little bit more on the active side as we look towards Twin Falls, but those have been a little bit more showery in nature. We haven't seen as much energy as we've seen in western Idaho as with these. So the showery conditions continuing there. You can see that on our radar. And you can see that those showers have not had any lightning, but we have had a few in some areas towards Ontario, and in that shower that just passed through Boise produce a couple strikes of lightning. So nothing that has been especially strong. However, we do expect the showers to stay in the mix today in the overnight hours and continuing into Friday and Saturday, as well as a low pressure continues to stay over the region. Also, a note for Wednesday, which will be Easter. Things are turning a little bit more wet and windy. However, that will differ depending on where you are. So for tonight, we'll continue to see the rain taper off, but still staying sticking with the chance of that. Tomorrow looks a little bit drier for us, and you can see that those showers get more scattered in nature, and then more of that moisture returning specifically for Magic Valley areas on Sunday, while western Treasure Valley spots are looking a little bit more on the windy side. You can see that those temperatures are staying in the 60s during that time frame before we get up into the 70s next week.
All right, lots of comments today. We're trying to get to as many as we can. This one from Ron in Meridian regarding the proposed immigration laws. or law, stand back and watch your food prices soar when they round up all the farm workers. A lot of people have said that and made that mention before. There needs to be a better, I guess, visa program in order for our farmers to have employees. Amazing to me that Idaho's farm subsidies never get the legislative scrutiny that programs to feed kids get, says Cecil in Meridian. More along those lines, I hope Idahoans are paying close attention to what our legislature is doing. It seems they are creating a version of Texas. It's troubling that in their testimony they spew a lot of mistruths about several bills. I wish they'd just go home before they do more damage. That was from Carol, I believe. Once again, the elite of the State House have spoken. You vote to continue bringing babies into this world. We get this one a lot. But you refuse to feed, educate, house, and clothe them. Have you ever been hungry? You need to walk in others' shoes, says Marcy. Senate Bill 1445, just more proof the Republicans are not pro-life. They're pro-control. They don't care what happens to the children after they're born. Diane in Star says, have a good day with those thoughts. Please stop feeding our low-income children during the summer so they can be forced to start stealing to survive. That way we can keep our prisons full, says Larry. What are these heartless folks thinking? A couple of more here. So Idaho screws up and fails to apply for the federal program for kids and follows up by refusing to feed them this summer, all based on bad information. Food is not welfare, says Jack. Legislature rush on these last-minute bills. That certainly will end up in court. Maybe the emphasis should be put more dollars to defend these cases or bills in court, which makes sense since the state never wins these cases and we keep paying for it. Could be a possibility. We'll see more of these in court. We'll see you tomorrow.